The old order is gone and it's not coming back. One of the bold statements from Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech this week at the World Economic Forum. Carney challenged the behaviors of Trump's America and suggested an ambitious path forward for middle powers.
Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. And the question for middle powers like Canada is not whether to adapt to the new reality. We must. The question is whether we adapt by simply building higher walls or whether we can do something more ambitious.
Those sentiments were echoed by several other countries this week, including Germany.
This new world of great powers is being built on power, on strength, and when it comes to it, on force. It's not a cozy place. We do not have to accept this new reality as fate. We are not at the mercy of this new world order. We do have a choice. We can shape the future.
Thjorven Bellman is Germany's ambassador to Canada, and she joins me now. Nice to see you, Ambassador. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to ask you about the Prime Minister's speech in Davos earlier this week. It seems to have attracted a lot of attention in foreign capitals, and really because of the message that he relayed, and that's that middle powers kind of need to band together in the face of coercive action from some of the big giant countries in the world, specifically the United States in this case, but also others. How is that speech being received in Germany?
I think like everywhere else, it was very well received. Congratulations to the Prime Minister. That really was a very remarkable speech. I think he caught a moment in the room, but beyond, it really struck a chord with a lot of people around the globe, and certainly made headlines in Germany as well. And when you listen to what the Chancellor said in Davos, you actually see a lot of alignment, same messages around the fact that, you know, this new world order is there, but we have agency in it, and that's what our task is ahead of us.
I want to ask you, too, about Greenland, which was kind of the other major topic of discussion at that summit. Obviously, the U.S. president, has climbed down from his threats of imposing tariffs on Germany and other European allies that were opposed to his imperialism in the region. But he seems to suggest that there is a framework of a future deal that he has concocted with NATO. There seems to be some sort of discussion with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General. I'm wondering what Germany knows, if anything, about what is potentially on the table here for the United States. Is there some recognition that maybe there will be American sovereignty for parts of that territory, and is that something you could live with?
So I don't think it's up to me to comment on any of the details of this, having not been part of that. I think we are, as a result of these talks, and they really started earlier last week when first the German foreign minister went to Washington and the Danish foreign minister and Greenland foreign minister went to Washington, and then sort of throughout the week and through the Davos days. I think the point where we are now is a much better point. We can now return to the meeting rooms and have the discussions there instead of leading them in front of the microphones and via through social or Twitter. And it's really there are really two tracks now. The first track is the NATO track, where we've put ideas on the table already last week of what we think a stronger NATO presence in the Arctic could look like, because Arctic security is important to all allies, and we are ready to do our share, and also Canada is a leading nation in these discussions, and this will now go through the proper NATO channels and hopefully lead to decisions in the months to come. And then there's the bilateral track between the US on the one hand and the Kingdom of Denmark and Greenland on the other hand, where already after the talks of the Danish foreign minister last week, we had an agreement, or they had secured an agreement to set up a very high-level working group. And now we are back at the point where actually this process can take its turn. A first meeting to see how that could look like took place yesterday, and we hope that these discussions now can progress.
It does seem like Trump is insistent on some form of sovereignty for the U.S. over Greenland. Obviously, Canada has made it known that that's a decision that should be made by folks in Greenland and in Denmark as well, given that it is a territory of that country. What is Germany's position? Should there be American sovereignty over military bases or parts of Greenland, or is that just a non-starter for you?
I mean, the German government, I think these past weeks has been very clear when it comes to territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark and sovereignty and the right to self-determinations, that these are not negotiable for us. And when you saw the reaction of the European Union member states to a threat that we would be tariffed over defending principles like these, that member states were very unanimous in their message, saying, you know, if this is what's going to happen, we will be very measured but very firm in our response. At the same time, I think it's important to always continue to reach out to the administration and really try to come back to a place where we can talk about any sort of possible, you know, lax insecurity or whatever, but based on facts and based on a recognition of sovereignty for the Kingdom of Denmark.
I want to ask you about what President Trump said about NATO allies in Afghanistan yesterday on Fox News. Have a listen.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, little off the front lines.
Little off the front lines. We know that's not true, of course. When it comes to the Canadian case, we were in Kandahar, arguably one of the hottest spots, and we lost dozens of soldiers, and I know Germany has as well. I was looking at the numbers today. I mean, Germany made a major commitment to Afghanistan, stood up for the United States when they made that call after 9/11. You know, Germany losing 62 folks on the battlefield. What do you think when you hear the president sort of undermine NATO's support for the U.S. in Afghanistan and his suggestion that we haven't been there when the U.S. has called?
Well, I think, you know, definitely allies have been there for the U.S. when the U.S. called, as well as the U.S. has been there for us when we called. So, I mean, today I thought of really the families of the fallen, our veterans, and that, you know, this must be painful. And that's really all I want to say about that.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who has quite a close relationship with Trump, or at least he did, said that what Trump said about NATO and Afghanistan was appalling and that he should apologize if he made those remarks. He suggested maybe he was misspeaking. Do you think that Trump has to apologize to NATO allies for making those sort of comments?
As I said, I think, you know, these are comments that are very painful for our veterans and for their families, all those who've been traumatized, who lost life or limb there. So I would hope that we go back to a relationship and to, you know, a kind of communication that that takes note of what allies have done and becomes, you know, more constructive in the future. Before
Chancellor Merz became the German Chancellor last February, he actually said that one of his top priorities was to help Europe achieve independence from the U.S. step by step, as he characterized it. Do you think that this week's events make it more of an urgent call for independence in Germany and other parts of Europe? Is there a need now to take a bit of a step back, given the uncertainty that we're seeing from the United States? I think I would frame it differently, and the Chancellor framed it differently in his speech in Davos. So, yes, we live in an era where big power politics is more dominant than before. This has consequences for our security, our freedom, our, you know, prosperity. We need to do our homework, and we are already doing our homework in this regard, in the sense that we have to go get our own house in order. If we want to use the agency we have to work on that. So we have to up our defenses, and, you know, we've done that for some time. The German defense budget, regular budget plus extraordinary funds last year was close to 140 billion Canadian dollars, and we have about the same amount of money for this year. So this is very massive investment in our defenses. We have to make sure our economies are competitive again, and, you know, we are working on that, deregulation and things like that. And we have to sort of coordinate amongst those who are not the big powers. But all of this, and the Chancellor also said this, does not mean that we should give up easily on NATO or on our alliances with the United States, because these are important. The implications, if they were to fall, I think are very massive, and one shouldn't
do away with that lightly. So we will continue to invest in these alliances. As he put it, democracies don't have subordinates. Democracies have allies, friends, and partners.
All right, let's leave it there. Ambassador Bellman, Germany's ambassador to Canada, thank you for coming in. Nice to see you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.